Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Orlando. I am Reverend Margalie Belizaire, the minister of this congregation. With me today in service are Reverends Jonipher Kupono Kwong, Reverend Kirsten Humblett-Allen, Reverend Marnie Harmony, DLRE Judith Stein-Farrall, and 1U board member Greg Buckingham, as well as our music director, Aubrey Connelly-Candelario. And today we get to welcome a new accompanist, Danny, I just want to say all sorts of fancy things with your name. I don't know why, but it's Danny Manzon Villegas. And a loving thank you to all who work behind the scenes to make it possible for us to be able to gather on Sunday mornings. Thank you so much for all that you do to make worship possible here. Today, we're doing a question box service. So this is the third time we're doing this. Today, though, we are focusing on the different type of UU clergy roles. So if you didn't get a chance yet to write a question down, please do so. Otherwise, it's going to be a very boring service because we need your questions. So that different people have asked me in the past, what does it mean when we did this minister or that minister? So please get your questions on one of the cards back there, and the welcome team will make sure that Reverend Jonipher and I get them, and we'll give you such brilliant answers, you won't know what to do with yourselves. And after service, we'll have the conversation corner in the back, something that started, I want to say, a month and so ago. Just kind of join. It's going to be in Gore Hall, going towards the Alliance section. So just join in, come in and out as you're pleased. We greet you this morning, old friends and new ones, as we explore our Unitarian Universalist faith, which draws into a community of justice seekers with a commitment to lifelong spiritual growth and compassionate service to the community. As a UU congregation, we are non-creedal. Which means we don't subscribe to a specific set of beliefs. We live by a covenant that encourages ethical behavior, affirms democracy, celebrates joy, and celebrates the worth of each individual, and unites us in a search for truth and meaning. Whether today is your first time here with us or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, you are welcome here. Whoever you are, whoever you love, you are welcome here. In this community, we welcome your whole self. We welcome your race, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental abilities, economic status, or religious background. You are welcome. For more information about our congregation and announcements, go to orlandouu.org or email us at info@orlandouu.org. Children will go to activities when we sing them out during After Time for All Ages. Our youth are welcome to stay in the service or join the kids for building creations with boxes and cardboards. The nursery is open until noon. We have two special announcements for you. One is today you get to ask Reverend Jonipher and I questions about clergy roles. In 2 weeks, that is September 3rd, you get to give answers. At least you get to stand on your soapbox for about 2 minutes to share your humble opinion, or for some not so humble. Maybe you're feeling passionate about bumper stickers, or you have feelings about wearing white after Labor Day. Or you might wish to talk about the unfairness of the recent anti-trans laws in Florida, or the dangers of climate change, or something altogether different. We encourage you to come We want to hear what's on your mind, but be aware that this will be a multi-gen service, so children will be present. And the other announcement we have for you, we only have 3 weeks left before the Holly Near concert, so make sure to purchase your tickets now. Also, the music team is looking for volunteers who'll help with security, with parking, and selling Holly Near merchandise before and after the concert. If you can help, please see Audrey or Steve. Steve, Hannah? Not here today. Okay. All other announcements are on slides before and after the service, and we have links to the weekly update, either up on the screen there. You can also find it on our website. And please, if you click on this QR code, it will take you to our weekly update. And at the bottom of it, we also have a link to, this QR code will take you to our order of service. And in there, you can find a link to our weekly update. Thank you again for being in community with us this morning, whether in person or online.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Kirsten Homblett-Allen. These are my children, and we are happy to light the chalice with you today. If you could join me in saying the words on the screen behind me, in the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. And please rise and body your spirit and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 358, Rank by Rank. The words will be projected on the screen.
Our call to worship this morning comes from the Reverend Christian Smith. It takes a spark, it takes fuel, it takes air, and it takes a container to hold them all. It is only with all of these things that we make fire. It takes a call. It takes learning and experience. It takes love, and it takes a community to hold them all. It is only with all of these things to make a minister? Let's take a moment to greet one another, shall we?
Am I? Yes. Aha. Good morning, everyone. I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Enrichment here at First Unitarian, and I am, as the Reverends have told you to this morning, we are having a service with questions. So I'm inviting our children who might have questions for the minister to come, the ministers, we have 4 of them in the house this morning, to come on up and have the kids ask some questions about ministers and ministry, or just be here if they want to share in the responses. So if our kids would like to join us, of all ages, and if you're not, you can stay right where you are. So, in a church, we have several ministers. Well, in this church, we have several ministers. So I'm going to ask. I'm thrilled. Thank you, folks. I am so glad to see you up here. Is one of the ministers coming with their kids? Good morning. So what, do any of you have a question for the ministers about it? Yes, Ansley. Say that louder into the mic.
How do you become a minister?
Awesome question.
That is an excellent question, if you don't mind me taking this. There's a website on the UUA site called How to Become a Minister. So that's a great question. We have a process that you have to go to seminary, which is something that you do after you go to college. And we also have an internship process. So, you know, you join or you're hired by your congregation to do that internship. And so that's schooling and some real life experience. And also, you go see this body called the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And they ask you a few questions to see if you're ready to become a minister or not. And it takes the congregation to support you in this process of becoming a minister. So I'm kind of redacting it a little bit. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a bunch of documents you have to fill out and all this bureaucratic processes, right? But that's the essence of how to become a minister. And then a congregation ordains you to become a minister once you're credentialed by the Unitarian Universalist Association. Great question, though. Thank you.
Ainsley, are you like, So when in the call to worship, actually, Reverend Jonipher kind of mentioned the different parts. There's a call that is somebody has a feeling, right? That, wow, this is what I need to do with my life. So you get this feeling, so what you need to do with your life, and usually you talk with people, other people who are doing it, to see, have you thought about it, because, And then you do the schooling, right? And then some congregation is nice enough to let you watch other ministers do the work and let you practice doing the work and being in the congregation. And then, of course, if you don't have the support of the community, because as Unitarian Universalists, we insist that it is the congregation that decide if somebody can be a Unitarian Universalist minister. The word ordain that Reverend Jonipher just used. So it can take a little time, and for some people, a friend of mine, it could take about 3 years, or it could also take like 12 years. It took a friend of mine 12 years to complete it, so yes.
All right, Daniele.
What is a minister?
Can I throw it back at him for a moment? Daniele, what do you think a minister is?
A person who's in charge?
Okay. On that note, Reverend Margalie.
A minister can be a whole bunch of different things, but I think it is, in short, I'm thinking of myself, and then we have other ministers here too, can kind of speak a little bit to that. I think it's somebody who has made the decision to make what it is with their life, journeying or accompanying, give me a smaller word, journeying or accompanying other people, going with other people on their religious or spiritual journey. I think as people, we're always trying to figure out, why are we here? Why are we alive? How did we come to be, why? Why are we here? And I think ministers are people who have chosen to just be with people as they try to figure out those questions.
Please go.
That's as good an answer as any. I think of ministers as spiritual leaders and folks who have struggled and asked themselves these big questions, such as, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here on this planet? And all those other things that we've been thinking about and discussing as a community. And so I see a minister as also someone who represents you all, the congregation, whenever we're out in the world talking about issues that are important to us, like peace and justice and all those other things. So a minister's job is really quite varied, and there's a lot to this calling and profession that we call a minister.
Anyone else have, any of the other kids have a question?
Oh my goodness.
Uh-oh.
I'm a really big fan of the 7 principles.
Hold on, Paul.
Kids.
It's the online people.
I'm a really big fan of the 7 principles for kids. I feel like it's a good introduction to use when I meet someone who's not familiar with our congregation. Have you guys looked at, or do you know of how the 8th principle for kids might be written? Because it's a pretty complex thing to digest.
That's not a question about what a minister is.
So the 8th principle has to do with, I know that the first principle already covers the inherent worth and dignity of everyone, saying that each of us is important and has sacred worth. The 8th principle talks about how we also need to work on making sure that all of us, no matter what our skin color is, or where we grew up, or where we were born, that we're actively working towards making sure that our society treats everyone fairly.
Well, in short, I have not thought about it, but it is an excellent question, and one that I think, and I don't, as I'm thinking about it here, I haven't heard much talk about it, although our religious educator might have heard, maybe from Loretta, there's some work to be done around that, but I have not heard, I have not thought about it, but thank you for lifting that up.
To answer your question from a religious educator's point, Paul, yeah, the religious educators are experimenting with a lot of different language, and I proposed some to Mystic Grove, and we'll keep working on it, and we'll start bringing it into the room. If it's all right with you, Reverend Margalie and I kind of bounced around a couple questions that we thought the kids might like to know. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to ask a couple of them real quick. Is that all right with you? Okay. So we sort of talked about what a minister does. There was one question, are there ministers just for kids?
Sure. In the past, when you want to become a minister, they usually ask you which track do you want to head towards. Do you want to serve a congregation like Reverend Margalie? Do you want to be a religious education type of minister or a minister of religious education? There's so many different ways of being a minister, and yes, there is a designation of Minister of Religious Education, but we don't have you declare that before you become ordained anymore, or credentialed, I should say.
And then there was a question about, so ministers talk to people, and sometimes they talk about really serious things and things that are scaring them or things they're working on, right? Problems that you might be having. And the question sometimes comes up, if you tell your minister a secret, are they going to tell your parents?
So there is this thing called, so we're not Catholic priests, so they cannot share anything that is shared with them unless they think the person, and if there are Catholics here, I apologize if I'm describing this wrong. So unless they know the person is planning on committing some crime, right? So they're not allowed to share anything. So, but as Unitarian Universalist ministers, there are certain things that if we feel that you shared something with me, for example, right? And it is something that it's a situation where you are in danger, right? And I would tell you this, but there are certain things that if you shared with me, I would have to involve your parents, especially if it's something that's putting you at harm, right? So there are things that needs to be shared. Now, having said that, if somebody is just talking about their feelings or something, they just don't want their parents to know how they're feeling about certain things. No, that's not something that a minister can and should share. But if it's a situation where you are in danger or you are in a situation that could potentially put you in danger, then we have to do that. And not only that, there's this thing called mandated reporting, right? And so ministers, that is mandated reporting, I'll just say it briefly. So that is to say, if you are required by law to report certain things, right? And so as a mandated reporter, sometimes it's not just your parents that the minister has to report it to. The minister might need to report it to the law. But again, those are situations that's around danger for you as young folks. Yes.
And that goes for your RE people too. If we feel like you are in any kind of danger from anything, we're going to go and ask somebody for help to help keep you out of danger. And that's really the goal. Reverend Margalie, Reverend Jonipher, Reverend Kirsten, Reverend Marnie, we are so glad you are here and resources for us. If you have any questions, and I say this to all the kids in the room and any of the youth and anyone listening online today, if you need your minister, these folks are really awesome and good resources. So thank you very much. Did you have any other question, Ansley? Sorry. All right, so we are now going to sing our children out as our adults build a bridge to support and send warmth and love to our kids as they leave to build with cardboard boxes today. We're going to make all sorts of neat things. Come and join us. Thank you all.
Let it shine. I am Greg Buckingham, a member of the Board of Trustees, and we invite you now to the practice of generosity. It is one of our spiritual values which sustains the life and ministry of the church community. Let us be grateful for the opportunity to give, for it is a privilege to be able to do so. And let us be grateful for our needs, for they give us the opportunity to practice receiving. Today's collection will be used for the ministries of this congregation. Also, please note, and I hope behind me, the Share the Plate partner for the month of August is Harbor House. Harbor House is an agency that provides services to survivors of domestic abuse and their children. You can use the link in the newsletter or on the screen to donate directly to them, and please let one you know that you did so. The offering will now be collected. Note that you can also give online using the link. Let us joyfully receive what is offered here today in the spirit of gratitude and fellowship.
This is the time in our service that we set aside for the deep sharing of our hearts and for prayer and meditation. If you have a sorrow that you need witnessed or help with, or have a joy that you wish to share, an email to joysandconcerns@orlandouu.org during the week. If you are attending in person, you can also fill out a card at the registration table and hand it to an usher before the start of the service. And after the prayer and meditation, we will invite you forward to participate in a candle lighting ritual. Bring your joys and your sorrows as we come together. Come as you are. Your whole self is welcome in this sacred space. And today, from 1U, today's flowers are provided by Catherine Vaccaro to honor our new accompanist, Daniela Monzon-Villegas. She not only plays the piano beautifully, but also has a stunning voice and a positive spirit. welcome Danny. Mike Moran, Patty's husband, suffered a fall this past week and has been hospitalized for several days in Advent Hospital on the Rollins campus. We wish him well as he recovers. And for all the joys and sorrows of this community shared today, and for those held close to our hearts, let's pray, let's celebrate, and let us send one another healing energy. We come now into a time of prayer and meditation. If you'd like, please close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. From the four winds gathered, rank by rank, we are in these hallowed walls together. We witness here the dreaming of the night and the labors of the day. Let us take a moment to bring ourselves right here, right into this very moment. And please, if you can, put your hand over your heart and feel that thrum. Think of the extraordinary strength of this muscle that never gets to rest. Take a moment to send your beautiful heart some love. And after that love bath has made your own heart even stronger, take a moment to share your heart's warmth and care with so many people and places that need our prayers. Picture those Ukrainian children, perhaps even one child you may have seen a picture of, trembling inside a subway shelter in Odessa. Send love and prayers. Picture that child shakily preparing to tell their parents that he is really she. Send love and prayers. Picture that unhoused Kissimmee family wondering where they will sleep tonight. Send love and prayers. Picture the Maui residents who have lost absolutely everything but their very lives. Send love and prayers. Picture Georgia prosecutor Fani Willis trying to stay strong after Trump and others' repeated attempts to discredit her, even harm her. Send love and prayers. Picture that teacher struggling with whether they can speak a truth about their own family or about the need for DEI in their very classrooms. Send love and prayers. Bear witness to what is, what simply is. And now prepare to come forward for our candle lighting ritual. We light our candles for our own hurts, our own fears, our own hopes, and we offer candles for loved ones who need our prayers and support. We light candles of remembrance, of loving kindness, of hope. And as we do so, we gently and tenderly remind ourselves that being part of this exhausted and exhilarating world means living through a never-ending cycle of joys and concerns. May it be so.
So, here we are, our third installment of Question Box service. So this year, the reason we decided to focus on clergy, the different roles, the different titles that in Unitarian Universalism we use for UU ministers is that the question has come up a couple of times, and I think even among staff, it wasn't clear what we meant by when we say community minister, affiliate minister, settled minister, and so on, and felt that, and I'm always about communication and people getting information, so we thought this was one way to do that. And this is a perfect time to do it because we have Reverend Jonipher here with us, whose work with the Unitarian Universalism was specifically that. The department where Reverend Jonipher worked, is it worked or still work? For the next 2 more weeks, he'll be with the, really the ministerial fellowship department. And that's the department that kind of oversees what UU ministers do. If we are, anything like how the becoming process, when during our time as active ministers, and even, even after that time, if we're lucky enough, we get to retire. So all of that and what in between and what is happening and the different congregations with us, holding us accountable when need to, provide, making sure that we are properly trained as we come to be with you in different congregations, and thought, whoa, this is an opportunity that I don't know that we'll have it again. So why not have Reverend Jonipher, and really his last week here with us, speak to us about that. And so this was the idea for that specifically. And so in our conversation, we wanted to be very relaxed, very more of a curious setting, and there may be things that you will think of that we probably didn't think of, and we may not know the answers. Don't worry. We'll make sure to get that for you in the weekly updates. Like, I don't know, there might be some questions, like Paul back there, for example, took me by surprise with that question, So like, let's say it's something that we didn't know and we don't know anything about it at all. We promise not to make it up. We'll answer as honestly as we can, and then if we don't know the answer, but we can research it, we'll find it for you. But the one thing I just want to make sure in all of our talk about the different types of ministers and what it means and what they involve is that I do believe all ministers, and when we think about intentions, all ministers enter this vocation with I believe, with the hope of being able to be of service to humanity as we all search for meaning, about this big question of why are we here? What is our work while we're here? So I think no matter what the minister is doing or where they are in their ministry, I do think that is at the core of it, what those of us who venture there I believe that is why we venture into this water. I remember a minister said to me once when that was the first person I went to, and I said, I have to call for ministry, and then he said to me, well, you should really think about this. Make sure that there is nothing else that you would rather do, because it is a hard job. You really have to think about it, because it's a big responsibility that you are taking on. So make sure that this is the only thing that your heart is truly telling you to do, because otherwise, find something else to do. So, so with this, we will go ahead and start. Reverend Jonipher is going to come forward and just say something first, I believe, and then we only have 2 questions at this point. So we will, there are more, wonderful. So, yes, and then if after we answer these questions and we have time, we'll have you raise your hands and we'll take other questions. Reverend Jonipher.
Thank you for sharing that, Reverend Margalie. I too, when I was growing up, I was 7 years old, lived with my uncle in a different province than where my parents lived because my mom was a little too sick to take care of me. And he was a minister of one of the largest Protestant Chinese congregations in the Philippines. And I hope he's not watching this, by the way. So after living with him for a year and getting to witness what it was like to be a minister and all the politics that he had to deal with and all the complaints and all the gossiping and all of that, I thought, who in their right mind would want to be a minister? So that did not even make my top 20 list of what I wanted to be when I grew up. Of all things is that one day I'll be a minister. But you know, the universe had a different plan, I suppose. And so that's how I engaged in this process. And I was originally ordained with the Metropolitan Community Church, which is a predominantly Christian tradition that has a primary outreach to the LGBTQ plus community. And then back in in seminary, I encountered 7 Unitarian Universalist seminarians. And when I heard about the 7 principles, I thought, wow, this is exactly in alignment with my values and where I wanted to go as well. And at the time, it took me 4 years after I got ordained in that tradition in order to transfer my credentials, because there were so many what I would consider red tapes that I had to cut through in order to see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And so, Gabby, if you don't mind putting up on the screen the various types of ministry, I want to begin with the formation process. So, first of all, you fill out an application form called the Initial Inquiry Form, and then you become an aspirant, and then you have to do a few more things, such as do your internship and your clinical pastoral education, which is an opportunity to practice pastoral care to others. That's how you become a candidate. And after you do a few more things, like take a career assessment and all of that, that's how you become credentialed in our faith tradition. But before then, you could become an intern minister, which takes 1 or 2 congregational years, typically, depending on whether you do it full-time or part-time. And if you get special permission from me or my successor, you could also serve for a year in a contract ministry position in a congregation. That's why contract ministry is in parentheses. So after you do all that and you see the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which is sort of like a vetting body, right? That's when you enter preliminary fellowship, which is, I think, Reverend Margalie, you're on the last year of preliminary fellowship, right? So there's 3 renewals that are required for that. And after you go through that process, then you become a fully fellowship minister. It used to be called final fellowship, but we all realize that ministry is an ever-evolving thing. So we tell people that we're a learning community and not a learned community. So I learn something new every single day of this job, actually. So full fellowship kind of implies, you know, in the academic world, I guess that would be considered tenure. So it's a little bit more difficult to get rid of you at that point, shall we say? Or another way to look at it is up till this point, you're held accountable with the Unitarian Universalist Association, but after you achieve full fellowship, you're held accountable still with the UUA to some degree, but mostly because of our congregationalist polity, you're held accountable by a congregation. So it's easier for parish ministers, for example, to get that, but a little trickier with community ministers. So I'll get there in a few. But no 2 parish ministers are created equal to a certain degree, because there's so many different types of parish ministry. So there's the settled minister, like you have with Reverend Margalie, who has an indefinite letter of call with you all. So she could serve anywhere from a year to 30 years, some ministers have served, right? So by the way, I tend to not use the word forever minister because there is no such thing, right? Even parish ministers are basically serial monogamous. So they're dedicated to one congregation at a time for a period of time, then usually they move on unless they retire. And what you get between settled ministers is an interim minister. So that could be anywhere from 1 or 2 years. And in fact, that's what I'm going to be doing at the Fourth Universalist Society in the city of New York, is I'll be serving as their interim minister. And there's a very new thing, as in it's only been around for about 10 years, called a developmental minister. And these are usually ministers that are hired by the congregation to serve anywhere from 4 to 6 years because the congregation has had some kind of difficulty or another, like a conflict, a major conflict, or maybe their previous minister misconducted in some ways. So it takes a little bit more tender loving care, so to speak, to provide that congregation for 4 to 6 years. And there's also contract or consulting ministers, which are renewable every year, right, instead of a settled one. And then there's associate, assistant, or second ministers, especially with larger congregations. And so those are the various forms of parish ministers. And by the way, you know, I think in many circles, that's kind of the default. When I introduce myself to someone, for example, and say, I'm a minister, they usually ask me, which congregation do you serve, right? But that's not always the case, because we also have this other big category called community ministers. So chaplains, for example, who serve in a hospital setting, or even military chaplains. Believe it or not, that is a growing area within Unitarian Universalism. And these days, to be honest with you, we do have a parish minister shortage, because when we've been interviewing folks, for example, out of 16 one time, only 4 wanted to go into parish setting. So more and more these days, people who want to become ministers in a community ministry kind of setting. And there's also institutional ministers. I call us at this point, church bureaucrats. So we work on a denominational level. So for those of you who don't know, our main headquarters is in Boston, right? There used to be a joke that Unitarian Universalists believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the neighborhood of Boston, right? Pardon the sexist language, by the way. And so those of us who work for the association, those who work for the UU Ministers Association, those who serve as professors in seminaries, we're all institutional ministers. And there's other forms of community ministries, like serving as executive directors of nonprofits that are in alignment with Unitarian Universalist values, right? We have Kirsten Homblett, who works for Meadville Lombard and their Beloved Conversations program. That's considered a community ministry. If you work for a state action network, so several states have advocacy types of justice-seeking organizations. So those are all community ministers. And ideally, they would be an affiliated community ministers in covenant with the congregation and in covenant with the settled minister of that congregation. So initially, that's what I approached Reverend Margalie about back in, like February or March of this year. And the moment the board approved it and the moment we signed the paperwork is also the moment that I found out I got this gig. So I'm probably your shortest affiliated community minister ever in this congregation, right? And after a minister leaves a congregation, like Reverend Marnie, for example, you could become minister emeritus, or emerita, or emeritex, meaning that you are voted by the congregation to continue to be recognized as a minister of a congregation, but you're not actively serving that congregation. And hopefully, that minister would have a covenant with, again, the current settled minister, because there could only be one minister in the room at the time, right? So, and yeah, hopefully there's no, getting into the congregation's business by the former minister. And there's retired ministers, again, like Reverend Marnie is a happily retired minister who at this point isn't even taking on pulpit supply of any sort, right? Yes, all right. And some people fail miserably at retirement, as in all professions. And so those are the various types of ministries that we have. That's a lot, isn't it? I'm probably missing a couple of other designations there, but I'll just stop there and we'll get to the questions.
So I want to say you've mentioned a little bit of that. So in our congregation, you have a settled minister. You have Reverend Marnie over there, who is both a retired minister, and the congregation voted to make Reverend Marnie minister emeritus. And then, I know I saw Reverend Kirsten here somewhere. And Reverend Kirsten is a community minister. And I like to say the UUA doesn't like to have renegade ministers running around and not be covered. It's a Christian term, I know, be covered by a congregation. So all community ministers need to be affiliated with a congregation. And Reverend Kirsten is affiliated with us. And Reverend Jonipher was affiliated with us maybe for 2 days, and we may have other ministers who affiliate with us. And Reverend Kathy was our previous settled minister, who is retired. Well, I think she fully retired this year. Prior to this, she was doing some gigs, as you were saying. I think she fully retired this past church year, and may at some point, depending on how the congregation feels, become minister emeritus here as well. So I just wanted to speak about our ministers here. So I'm looking at, it just seems like the time is flying. But I thought somebody wanted to know the difference between affiliated and community minister. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that briefly.
Well, I think you covered it. So we don't like to have free-range ministers just floating around. And so one way to become to be in covenant is to become an affiliated community minister.
Yes. This question I thought, even though time is pressing, thought was important because it's specific to our situation here. It says, there was a lot of confusion after Reverend Kathy resigned why we couldn't contact her. Could you explain the covenant between ministers?
Yeah, and this is really more UUMA, the Ministers Association Code of Ethics, in that, again, you leave for a year or two. Some of us even have to unfriend folks on Facebook. And we explained that ahead of time, that, again, when we're here to provide pastoral care and guidance and all of that good stuff that a minister is supposed to offer, but we are religious professionals. So similar to how I had to sever ties with my therapist after I left her for a number of years, ministers also have to have a healthy leave taking so that you could fall in love with the next minister, right? And again, for her to be able to establish her presence and her authority as your minister coming in. So that's really more about a code of ethics than a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, and really it's the fairness of it all. Like when I left my internship, I had to sever ties because there was a new intern coming in. And especially if it's a minister you love that was leaving and now this new person comes in, so everything is like, well, that's not what Reverend Marnie used to do. That's not what Reverend Kathy used to do, and then it's like, and then if Reverend Kathy is accessible, well, let me just call Reverend Kathy then. So it's a whole thing about like giving this new minister time for you to get to know them and all of that. So that's one reason. And then one thing, and they didn't ask that here, it's a little confusing as far as how long. It depends sometimes on the number of years a minister was with the congregation, and sometimes the ties and distance and so on. So there's not a hard, fast rule as far as how long. Another question is, how equipped are the ministers when it comes to supporting individuals who are trying to discover their gender and sexual identities? I think I can stick to that a little bit, since I'm probably out of all the ministers here, the one newest out of seminary. I do feel that seminaries, and I don't know what it used to be, I think it's the same way. I think doctors are being better trained with bedside manners. I do think ministers are being, I'll just say it, and you all can yell at me, the rest of you ministers here can yell at me. I think are being better trained as far as paying attention to specific things like that. I think there is this, the idea of like really being the minister for the time you are living in. And obviously we are living in a time where these conversations are being had a lot more. And then we're living at a time where we're trying to create spaces for people to be able to be who they truly are, be able to speak about it, be able to consult with someone if they need to about it. So I think we are being trained accordingly, trained to be able to be ministers for the times we live in, which means that in seminary, those are part of the discussions, those are part of where we find resources, those are part of how we engage people who come to us wanting that support. So yes, we do receive that support and are trained to provide that support.
And I should also add that the UUA is in the process of coming up with a curriculum in collaboration with the UU Ministers Association on sexuality and gender identity. And it's, and the UUMA, as part of our membership renewal, we need to show a certain number of continuing education hours these days, and those do count towards that.
This one is a quick one, I think. Obviously ministers work weekends. Do ministers get a weekend, quote unquote, off? That is 2 days off running. And what happens if while you're taking that time off, an emergency happens, for example, death or something? So I do normally take the last Sunday of the month off, and yeah, and if an emergency happens, you're a minister 24/7 basically. So if an emergency happens while I'm away, and it's a type of emergency that would require me to come back, I would come back. The good thing is there are other ministers here that I could probably reach out to and say, hey, listen, I am away and this is happening. Would you? You know, so, but yes, if I'm off and something happens, then the responsibility is on me to make sure that it's taken care of, either before I left, having made arrangements for things like that, or reach out to another minister to make sure that it's something is done in the immediacy. Oh yeah, good question. I'm usually off on Fridays. And I think I have muscle memory now of it, that now when Fridays come, I have not anywhere near a good feeling about my computer. I don't know, it's like my body knows, like, no, you don't want to touch that. So, and I'm looking at time, there's so many wonderful questions here, and it's already after 11:30, and I'm looking at some faces. So what I will do is I'm going to read out these questions, and then I will write a brief, I don't like very long responses, but I'll read brief little responses for you and put them in the weekly update. One is the professional training the same for all you ministers? Is there a relationship between size of the congregation and what type of minister is serving? What kind of support is offered to you ministers? And in your role as a minister, what is a time you made a mistake? Haha, I probably purposely left that one out. What did you learn from it? So I will put it this way. I make mistakes all the time. I'm probably making a mistake right now while I'm up here with you. And what is the music of the church ministry? How is the music used? I think I understand this question to mean with the service, how do we tie it in? So, yeah. So, yeah, so sorry about that. We are running out of time, and I know people may have plans, so I don't want to push it too hard. So, let's join me in singing our closing hymn, number 113. Thank you.
Let's do just one verse.
Let's do just one verse.
Our closing words are from the Reverend Erica Hewitt, and this will be an interactive one. I have the first part, Reverend Margalie has the second part, and you all have the third part. The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core. A striking concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer.
To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. This is our work as a religious community to encourage one another, to be bold in engaging the world around us, as well as what scares us internally. To give one another the confidence and heart to live as fully as possible.
With full
hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We go forth from here, embodying our shared ministry, encouraging those within and beyond our walls.
In our call to action this week, I want to encourage you to just go to the UA website. If you don't know anything about the Living Tradition Fund, go to that website and check it out. And basically what I am asking you to do, I'm inviting you to do as a call to action, and see how this fund provide help to ministers who, whether retired or in whatever ministry they're active, but they're not getting paid enough, or when a minister has an emergency and needs some financial assistance. This is a fund the UUA puts together, and the money comes from donations. So if you want, my call to action is to invite you to take a look at what the Living Tradition Fund is, and if you feel called to donate, to do so. So I will now invite Reverend Kirsten.
Please say these words with me as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.